No episódio de hoje eu trago para vocês Marcos Filli, 6 vezes competidor do Crossfit Games e também um super empreendedor, um super corpo e um super empresário. Para quem não conhece, Marcos Filli, depois da carreira de atleta no Crossfit Games, ele abriu o seu próprio box, movendo para uma nova metodologia através da OPEX e depois lançando o seu Functional Bodybuilding, que dominou o mercado brasileiro como referência de como treinar de forma funcional utilizando a maromba inteligente. Nesse bate-papo a gente vai conversar sobre esse tempo dele dentro do CrossFit, vamos perguntar sobre toda a polêmica que houve com o Greg Glassman, sobre o que realmente o Marcos Filli acha do Dave Castro e quais são as dicas que ele dá de nutrição e treino para qualquer pessoa que queira performar dentro do CrossFit. Depois a gente muda um pouquinho o tópico e começa a entrar na dieta do Filli, porque todo mundo que segue o Filli sabe que corpo é uma coisa pelo qual ele é conhecido. E ele vai falar de todas as manipulações que ele faz em relação à estratégia nutricional para fazer com que o corpo dele aumente, diminui, aumente o percentual de gordura, diminui o percentual de gordura e qual as diversas estratégias alimentares que ele utilizou ao longo do tempo para fazer a mudança na composição corporal dele. Eu vou pressionar ele um pouquinho, você vai perceber sobre se alguma vez ele já desenvolveu algum tipo de relação negativa com a comida e como isso afetou o desenvolvimento dele social e com pessoas ao lado dele. Vou perguntar sobre o gasto calórico dele, se é muito elevado, o que ele fez de estratégia em relação a isso. Tanto eu quanto o João, a gente vai pegar firme nesta parte. E depois a gente entra para um pedaço mais de negócio e carreira, como foi mudar de ser um atleta para ser um empreendedor e hoje um influencer de mídia social fitness tão conhecido. Espero que você goste, pra gente foi um prazer porque é uma pessoa que a gente admira demais. Bom episódio para você. Mais um episódio começando aqui do Híbrido Podcast. E hoje eu vou falar pra você que eu tô empolgado, tenso, nervoso, tudo ao mesmo tempo.
Feliz.
Olha a cara aqui do menino, vocês conseguem ver. Porque é um dos caras que não só foi a principal força motriz para a nossa mudança de pensamento no fitness, como ter um propósito além do fitness competitivo, como inspiração de business e tudo mais.
De treino.
De
sempre trazer uma nova proposta além do CrossFit raiz. Enfim, eu acho que nunca foi surpresa para ninguém que a gente levantou a bandeira dele.
Dessa pessoa.
Então
você vai falar quem que é.
Que é o Marcos Filli, desde o começo. Acho que muita gente no começo sempre falava isso, o seu treino vai ser estilo do Marcos Filli, e a gente falava, do tipo, ele é uma das nossas inspirações e dos nossos motivos, como o Marcos disse, de fazer essa transição.
But let's cut it short, because the guy's here and he's not understanding. Just for you to understand, Marcos, we just said how important you were for our transition to fitness, because for the longest time, aside from CrossFit, we didn't know where to go or what to think. And you were, without knowing, of course, one of the mentors that we had in terms of aesthetic, business-wise, and how to do after CrossFit and what are the tools and the ways you can move, the way you can think about nutrition and business itself. So it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Yeah.
No, well, thank you for that introduction. And yeah, it's always, I'm still to this day, it blows my mind. Sometimes when I meet individuals and they credit their experience with me and my content as having such an impact for them, because like you said, I unbeknownst to me, we make an impact on people, or I'm fortunate to make an impact on people all over the world. And it really does inspire me to hear the stories. So thanks for sharing that.
And I was telling, before we get in that, how important you are for Brazilian people. And even you said I didn't know that you were probably one of the names when it comes to CrossFit to this day, even though you're not competing anymore, you have your own methodology and the way you train, you think about, and you're besides CrossFit now. You have your own way of communicating, of showing in socials, but people to this day, you're a name that is remembered, and it shocked me that you didn't know how big was your following in Brazil.
Yeah.
To the extent it is.
even before, like when we told you about Lucas. So if Lucas start following your program in 2017, we were like the CrossFit guys, hardcore in 2016, 15, cheering you up like, oh, that's Marcus Filly now.
And I even remember the first time I showed Lucas your profile, and he said, no, I want to do what he's doing. This is the body, so I want to do what he's doing. Just tell me what he's doing. That's how he got in touch, like with you and started DMing you.
That's wild. That's wild. Well, what city are you in? What cities are the biggest, like, you know, fitness culture cities in Brazil where people have been, one, following CrossFit, but making that transition maybe to functional bodybuilding? Does it pop up in specific locations? Is there like, are there hubs that you're aware of?
I can tell that we were the main like guys who promote you in the beginning in the CrossFit community, like years ago.
Yeah, because I think the message related a lot to us. We were in a transition when you did what you did, and you have the shoulder injury, and I think it was like around 2016, if I'm not wrong. We're going to the same process of looking into all the alternatives, and we found what you're saying. And I remember you were with OPEX, and you released an ebook about functional bodybuilding and like the guidelines and how it's going to be and a lot. And it resonated with me and João to such a big deal that we even talked about it and start trying to implement, to follow the program, to talk to Lucas. And then Lucas is like, everything that he touches amplifies. So everybody he starts talking about Marcus Filly. I remember he tagged you in some posts. And then everybody came to talk to us like, okay, are we going to have a class about it? And you're still figuring out how you're going to do it, like the business model, if you're going to do a class, if it's... So that was this whole transition, but especially Rio and São Paulo. These are the hubs when it comes to it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, then I owe you to a debt of gratitude for being in kind of a leading edge and bringing awareness to what I'm doing in Brazil. So thank you for, having me on the podcast, but doing the work early on in 2017 to spread the word. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
When Marcus shot high, like, I sent an invite to Marcus Filly. Let's see if he comes, and he accepted the invitation. And when you did, I got so excited, man, that I can't describe it now. So
right on.
I'm really looking forward to asking you so many questions.
Well,
okay, so now that we know ourselves better, we want to start like with your career in CrossFit and some questions more CrossFit related. And then we want to jump into other topics like functional bodybuilding, revival,
body composition,
body awareness, body positivity, the way you see your work now, your former work. So your first question, João.
So like, how you started with CrossFit mainly, and then transition to OPEX, to then having your own program. How was it like? Because you did 4 games. Am I right? I think you participate.
I did 6, 3 as an individual, 3 as a team member.
Yeah. And then in somewhere between, you went to the OPEX, and how was this first transition?
Sure, yeah. Well, I found CrossFit in 2009 was my first exposure to doing CrossFit. It was shortly after I had heard about it. I went and actually had a chance to do CrossFit in person in a class at a local gym, which was unique in 2009 because there were maybe less than 100 gyms in the world at that time. It was still very new. So I happened to be in San Francisco where Kelly Starrett and his wife Juliet had a gym, and I went there and took my first class. And I got very much into the methodology of CrossFit from that point going forward. Like many people fall in love with it. I had a relatively big strength and conditioning background prior to that. However, this was like a lot of new information coming at me that I was experiencing for the first time. And simultaneously, I was getting into coaching as a career. I wanted to be a fitness coach. So I was having to learn, like, how do I become a coach? How do I also become better at CrossFit? And maybe after like 2 years of coaching CrossFit, or a year and a half of coaching CrossFit and doing the level 1 and the level, the various CrossFit certifications, I realized like I didn't have a very good foundation in fitness education and like traditional certification knowledge to sort of make me feel confident as a coach. So I went and found OPEX Fitness early on, which was OPT. That was the name of it was Optimum Performance Training was the company. And the figurehead was James Fitzgerald, who was the 2007 CrossFit Games champion. That's how I became aware of him, was that I was a very enthusiastic CrossFitter who knew their CrossFit history, was trying to coach CrossFit and participate in CrossFit, and James was the figurehead. So I said, what do you know? And he clearly was a smart individual. So I went and took courses with him to learn more about program design, more about assessment, more about coaching, like the art of coaching, to complement my CrossFit knowledge that I was getting from CrossFit.com through their seminars, certifications. And so I was using both of those as my foundation for like, this is how I'm going to coach people. And they're very different points of view, which was useful for me to see things from different perspectives. And
what would you say
ways.
Like it's the main difference between the two methodologies?
I think and that was their goal, was to sell CrossFit and the CrossFit methodology. I think interested in coaching coaches on how to be better coaches. They weren't necessarily saying, hey, we have the best method to train people. It was, we have the best way you as a coach to be more like an open thinking, like think about the totality of the person. So CrossFit is high intensity, functional movement across broad time and modal domains. OPT or OPEX is, hey, you can do CrossFit and also do bodybuilding, and you can do strength training, and you can train people for running and endurance, and everybody needs to be assessed. Everyone needs to have thoughtful programs. You need to have periodization. You need to develop progressions. You need to match somebody's skill to their actual program. Whereas CrossFit was like, hey, you're brand new. Let's go learn how to front squat. Hey, you're brand new. Let's go learn how to, you've been here for 10 years. Let's do the same thing for everybody. The whiteboard model where everyone does the same workout. OPT was, let's make sure everyone gets the right workout for them. So it's kind of individualized coaches, group, big,
Gotcha.
Exactly.
And back then, before you start giving these CrossFit classes, like what were your experience with fitness coach? Like you were...
Yeah, my personal history of getting coaching was really, I was mostly self-taught in the gym. When I got to, but I had spent 4 years in college training in a strength and conditioning model, which was very common to the U.S. collegiate system. So in collegiate athletics across the United States, if you're in a well-funded program, you might be a soccer player, football player, or basketball player, or swimmer.
You're going to learn how to squat, bench, row.
Squat, bench, pull up, power clean, power snatch, deadlift, GHD, some of the fundamentals, and just build progressive strength that way. And so I got exposure to that. After college, I actually got an injury in college, which I had to rehab. I didn't know how to do that. I hired a coach at one point to help me with that process. So I learned their method and I got some personal training and participant group fitness. That was another experience of getting coaching. But outside of that, I was mostly self-taught, just devouring information off the internet throughout the 2000s. And, even in the late 90s, I was reading things online. So when I got to CrossFit, I was just like Coach Glassman was my coach. I was just following the program and doing the .com workouts. And I realized at some point in 2010, I was like, you know what? I'm learning about personalized coaching through OPEX. I think I'm limiting myself not having a coach to help me achieve my goal, which was being the best CrossFitter I could be. So I hired a coach at that point, sort of help guide my CrossFit journey. And it was an OPEX coach for, about 5 years or almost 6 years. I had a coach that was really designing all of my training that I did to become, a good CrossFit athlete. And because of that experience of getting education, personal coaching, and seeing the evolution of my career as an athlete and as a coach, that was when in 2017, I was like, I have to change the way I do things as a coach and building my career and building my business to sort of take the best of all these different things I've learned in the past and give them to the client.
When was your first year's game since you started?
2010.
Wow. So you started in 2009 giving CrossFit classes. In 2010, you were already competing in the games?
Yeah. Well, 2010 was, it was the first year that they hosted the CrossFit Games in Los Angeles at the, what was Home Depot Center, or the StubHub Center eventually became renamed. And I was on a team, and you had to qualify, but it was a much easier. I mean, it's not the same as qualifying today. Like we signed up, and we basically got to go to regionals. There was no open. The open started in 2011, so the qualifications got harder and more difficult from then on. But from 2010 to 2015, I competed in 6 games. I took the 2015 year off from competing, but then came back in 2016 for my last season.
When was your first game as an individual?
Yeah, that was 2013.
13. Okay.
And then looking from methodology.
That was the year we did the half marathon row, just for context.
How boring was that?
That was really, really quite terrible.
And looking from the outside, when you see the way you face fitness during the CrossFit time and the way OPEX was guiding you through the process, nowadays, if you look from the outside, the methodology you're using, what would difference you as an athlete from the other guys that were in the field with you at that point? Like mentality-wise, training style, the way you tackle the challenges, the guidance and professionalism that you had during that time?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable to see the state of the sport today, because what people do in CrossFit today is precisely I was coached and the way I trained. We were very ahead of the curve, and I'm not saying ahead of the curve doesn't mean you're going to win. I wasn't genetically gifted. I didn't have the mental fortitude to beat people as good as people like Rich Fromm. I mean, I wasn't as good, but I trained smarter than some of the top guys that were out there because of the coaching methods that my coaches utilized, which was looking at individuals, deciding what do you need to build your own strengths versus here's a group model, just everyone go do that. Everyone follow Comp Train, or everyone follow Misfits Athlete. There was always these groups of blogs that people would follow, and the best would rise, the genetically gifted would rise to the top. Versus me, it was if I followed a blog, I was not going to be as good as if I followed my own program and elevated myself that way, which a lot of athletes do to this day. Big difference was that we worked a ton on aerobic capacity, which now is a buzzword, and everyone does aerobic capacity, but I was doing aerobic capacity work before it was cool. I would do assault bike 1 hour, 90-minute, easy sessions a day, and it was all zone 2 heart rate work, which was people didn't do cardio back then.
And to be honest, people look bad at it at that point. I remember slow steady cardio was bicep curl. Don't do that.
I did the CrossFit endurance.
It doesn't fit with CrossFit.
I did CrossFit endurance certificate, and they do not teach you lists. slow.
No, it was all high intensity stuff.
Yes.
It was short, high intensity.
Yes.
But was crazy was that the people that were programmed were former endurance athletes that already had a base of aerobic training. So they had, like, Brian McKenzie knew how to run a marathon fine. You know? So you can't learn that by doing HIIT. You can't learn that by doing high intensity. You have to go and practice that. And we were practicing it with, you know, in the mornings we would do all of our long, slow, steady, repeatable aerobic work. And then in the afternoon we would do more of the traditional competitive, like, training for CrossFit. We were doing a hybrid of that, and people caught on later on and started doing that. You know, now it's I mean, you watch, if you just like I tune in periodically to like Mayhem Athlete on YouTube, and you just watch how the way they talk about training is the way that we were doing it 10 years ago. And now it's commonplace.
It's crazy. Yeah. But I think it's evolution of sport. Like, in the end, if you think what works for sports, it's what works in general in science. So people are trying to be fancy and say, no, it's all high intensity, or it's the same old saying that still works, and everybody knows it. But
I mean, if you look at go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I think there's like a slight delay between your audio and mine. So I'm jumping in before you're done speaking.
No problem.
But all I was going to say was, if you look at a sport like, you know, football, American soccer, but football, like, when you look at training across all of the big clubs and all of the big, you know, around the world, like, there's not difference in how people train for that sport, because what works. And there's been 100+ decades and decades of trial and error. So in 2012, when I was competing at the CrossFit Games, we're only 5 years into a professional sport. It wasn't even a professional sport. It was just a sport. We didn't know anything. So some people were trying this and some people were trying that. And it's like, but now every decade you will see that CrossFit just will become more, and like, as a sport, people that train for the games they'll all be doing this because it's what works. Like, you put in this many hours of aerobic work, you put in this many hours of weightlifting, you put in this many hours of this, and, you know, somebody will have like their trick or their thing that's going to make them better, but it will not be hugely different than what everyone else has been doing for years.
So now, knowing like how the games are and how the level of the field is, what would you say, training wise and nutrition wise, the best advice you can give for someone that wants to compete at a high level? Like, if you say top 3 when it comes to training and dieting for someone that wants to perform at elite level.
Can I be a little bit more specific?
Yeah.
So, like, training wise, we talk a little, but I want to get to the point of the nutrition.
Okay.
Because back then we were like, let's say, hey, you got to do paleo or more high fat and kind of low carb diet.
Yeah.
And now we know that if we had done a high carb diet with moderate protein and like a normal fat, I think would be much more, let's say, like, you can perform better than what we were doing.
Yeah.
And the nutrition wise, CrossFit never gets like a really, okay, that's our diet, and they are constantly changing. Like,
they're gurus.
Sure.
Yeah, like, back then, were you following the paleo or high fat diet? And do you think athletes?
Yeah, I went through a number of evolutions with my nutrition, and where I arrived at the end is very similar to what I would prescribe to somebody with the options, and I'll address those now, which is the low carb, high fat protein was absolutely incorrect for the sport of CrossFit. It's not the right fuel and straits to optimize your training performance, your competitive performance, and your recovery. So, because we came out of a paleo sort of early on in CrossFit, paleo zone, where that was the prescription to get people healthy and just the general CrossFit prescription, we took that into competitive CrossFit, and that was a big mistake. But we learned from it, we evolved, and then it became, okay, we need more carbohydrates to fuel. And so towards the end of my competitive CrossFit career, I was taking in much more carbohydrate, moderate protein. Probably I was eating more protein than that I needed. And I was eating probably more fat than I needed, actually. But the most important thing was getting more carbohydrates and getting more calories from training. So for training, rather. So if I'm advising somebody who's competitive in the sport of CrossFit, I have to assume that if they want to be serious, there's a considerable amount of training volume that they have to do, hours of training, and hours of training at the intensity level that will be required to make, successful progress. It's a highly demanding, energetic, sport. You need a lot of energy. You need a lot of calories. And I don't think people really that are competing in the sport, they mostly just focus on, let me get quality nutrition and let me hit my protein macros or let me hit my macros, but nobody's really investigating what is the optimum amount of calories and really zeroing in on, like, these are the number of calories that I need on a daily basis to create rhythm. A lot of CrossFit athletes eat clean, hit their macros, and then every fifth day they have these big, massive refeed days because they're not fueling enough during the week. They don't eat enough food. They're hitting their macros, and then they're like, oh, and then on the weekends, I just eat whatever I want. I'm like, why? You're not even hitting macros. You're just making up some arbitrary numbers on Monday through Friday, but then on the weekend, you're just surplusing calories. And I'm like, do some work to figure out what you need every day and eat the same thing every day. That's going to optimize your recovery, your performance, your energy state, your mental clarity, all of the things that we need to keep over years getting better at the sport.
Thank you.
High carb, moderate protein, or basically just get a gram per pound of body weight. No more is necessary. And then fill in with enough fat to hit your hormonal requirements and your recovery requirements, but then max out on your carbohydrate intake and the quality of it, how many vegetables and fruits you're going to eat. Like, it's going to come down to how much you can stomach and digest well and still hit great sessions. So find foods that are simple, easy to consume, don't sit in your stomach for too long, so that you can train 3 times a day, because that's also going to be a requirement, is to be able to ramp up your brain 2 to 3 times a day for training, because that's how you're going to have to compete in the sport. So you're going to compete, you're going to do 2, maybe 3 sessions a day. You're going to eat in this way that I just discussed. You're going to put probably 70 to 75% total time that you're training is going to be skill and aerobic work. So easy stuff, but you still have to put in the work. And then the other 25% is very intense work where it's going to feel really uncomfortable and shitty. But the rest of the time, you should not feel like, oh my God, like suffering and dying. It's like, if you train for 4 hours a day, 1 hour is going to suck and 3 hours are going to just be work that you got to go do. It's not going to feel like you're going to throw up, and you're not, so that's how it looks. And you got to do that for about 5 years, maybe probably in your 6th, 7th, or 8th year, you'll be able to reach your peak if you start sometime in your 20s.
Yeah.
So I want to dig deeper into nutrition, but before that, I just want to understand better, because when we see from the outside, it's one perspective. It's for someone from the inside, and with your knowledge nowadays, it's another perspective. When it comes to Dave Castro and the whole Greg Glassman issue that happened, first, Dave Castro, like your view, your relationship, how do you see the guy itself and his role in CrossFit and in the games? And then with Greg Glassman, like, where did you stand when the whole thing happened and went down with him being away from the company? And how did you see this whole movement of CrossFit nowadays?
What I know about, I'll speak to Dave Castro, and that is that he was I always admired how fiercely protective he was of the brand and the company that he worked for. That to me was something that I admire about anybody that works for any company. It's like, if you're a big figurehead in a company, you got to be ready to go to bat for that company and protect it in any way that you can. I didn't always agree with the way he did that, like where he would excommunicate people that disagreed, or publicly make statements about people who had a different opinion. But he lived and breathed CrossFit and loved the company, and people that worked with him and for him would generally say that as well. Like, he was great. It was clear what he wanted. So all of that. I also loved the way that he created some entertainment out of the sport, even if it didn't make sense from a programming perspective. Sometimes it was like, look, part of this is about entertainment, and we want to just make things entertaining. He was the kind of guy. I personally hated his Navy SEAL, let me get into the mental psychology with athletes and try and scare them and try and mess with their heads kind of thing. I thought, this is a physical sport. Like in basketball, don't have like the NBA commissioner coming out onto like the floor and like playing mind games with Kobe, being like, yo, like, let me, it's like, it just doesn't happen. Whereas Dave was this integral part of the process, and he would just like, at the welcome committee, it was like, I'm going to mind fuck these kids, like I'm going to mess with their heads. And I'm like, that's fine if you're like trying to be a Navy SEAL, a BUDS instructor and try and get people to wash out. But I'm like, we're here to like do a physical job. Like, why is this part of it? But hey, it was he got to do what he wanted with it. So I could never really complain. What I also recognized over the course of my trip was that the company and so much of the marketing was based around the sport of CrossFit. That's a lot of people became aware of CrossFit and were coming to CrossFit gyms. There was, of course, word of mouth, people doing CrossFit. Hey, this is so great. You got to come. Hey, friends, you got to come, which was probably the most powerful marketing. But the second most might have been, and probably was, the games and the athletes, like many others, that were the figureheads of this sport that people looked up to. And so that became very problematic for me as a business owner, a CrossFit gym owner, and an athlete, because what we were doing to try and win the CrossFit Games and what we were trying to teach people in the box were not the same thing. But they were getting confused and overlapped, and that was not ideal. So because when you try and do regionals workouts in the box with like your average member, they're getting crushed, and it's just programmed for them. This is why functional bodybuilding became into existence later on, but we don't have to jump to that yet. And then, Greg Glassman, I just try and focus on the things that he added, to the fitness community. I mean, methodology of CrossFit, regardless of who he was inspired by in the early days and other coaches that he, borrowed ideas. I mean, he presented an elegant, fitness model, which combined weightlifting, gymnastics, and cardio in a way he had never done. And it gave rise to something that's pretty special. Yeah. And he also had a very effective way of communicating about fundamentals. And I also appreciate the way that he normalized doing the 9 foundational movements. It was like, everybody needs to learn how to squat. Everyone needs to learn how to do a press. Everyone needs to learn how to, it's like, that got a lot of people moving, and they might never have moved in. There's a lot more people doing barbell back squats today, thanks to CrossFit and Greg Glass, than there are, thanks to anybody else. Like, it's a lot more barbells getting used, a lot more barbells, and a lot more bumper plates being sold as a product of that man. And so I have to be like, just big picture of what the value that these people have brought to the fitness landscape.
Let's focus on the good part.
That's good.
I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You won't hear me going. The only thing I'll say is I hate it when Dave Castro used to mess with my head. I was so guilty. Like,
would it work for
some
you?
athletes be like, oh, yeah.
Would he get into your head or no?
Totally. I'd leave the athlete welcome dinner. I'd go back to my wife. I'd be like, why am I here? I don't know. I hate this. Then he's going to take us out in the middle of the ocean and make us jump and swim to shore. And there's going to be sharks. And I hate this guy. But then by the end of the weekend, I was giving him hugs and high-fiving him because, that was how it goes.
Okay, so now switching gears, like from CrossFit and focusing a little bit on nutrition. I know you have a big transition, like nutrition wise. You like us follow different diets, and you had
Probably
like
the same path, like
yeah, we went to
zone
paleo,
diet, then paleo,
low
then
carb, intermittent fasting,
fasting.
like different time protocols, counting
Yeah.
calories, splitting macros, and we reach a point where for now we're more into eating for body composition than anything else. So 50% of your body, we are more from this methodology, comes from controlling calories. Then we believe that 30% is the way you split the calories into the macros and how you put calories to macros. Then we have the numbers of times
Timing.
you eat, the timing of food. Then you have the what you eat, and then you have supplements in the end. So it's very what RP talks, and we truly believe in that and the way. And we understand that body composition is one thing, and then eating for health is another, and they can meet in between, and you can make it practical in order for you to do that. But we want to understand a little bit better your transitioning from eating as an athlete to eating as a guy that wants to look good and move well to eating as a guy to want to look and move well, and it's a dad right now. So what was the journey that you went through, and what were the main difference, if people can understand, in terms of diet wise?
like calories, macro split, all these details.
Yeah, well, I think this could be a 2 hour
For
Yeah,
sure.
answer
yeah.
and podcast in itself, because this journey started for me at a pretty young age, and it informed a lot of what I talk about today and what I educate on and all the steps that I took. But what you just laid out is sort of like your pyramid of like how you build nutritional your nutritional IQ. What you have to learn first? Well, you have to learn calories in, calories out, and the energy balance. Then you need to understand how you manage that energy balance across different macronutrient categories. Then you talked about the free eating of meals and maybe timing, with the next thing being quality of food, like how much nutritional value is in the food, and then substitution. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I, as a 20-year-old, as a teenager, so 25 years ago, I started to get into resistance training, and I just trained. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't care. I just lifted weights. I maybe drank a protein shake, most days. But that was about the extent of my nutrition exploration. Was it. And I looked decent, but I didn't really ever think about it. I wasn't looking at myself in the mirror and being like, do I have abs? Do I have this? I was just like, am I muscular? And am I getting stronger? And then in my 20s, around 19 years old, 20 years old, I received a comment from somebody that was offhand, and it was basically like, you're looking a little soft, like you're looking a little chubby. And it was kind of true, because at this time I was eating just like a competitive athlete, because I was playing, American soccer, football in college, and I was training a lot, but I got injured. And so I had not trained for really like 3 or 4 or 5 months, eating like I was still training. So I was eating like and I just got soft. I mean, I probably put on 5 pounds of body fat. So he said this thing to me, and it was the first time, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, I don't like the way that felt to hear that. I want to change. And I started to follow a diet that my cousin had sort of put together, not for me, for my brother. It was my brother was doing this thing because he was very overweight, and and I was like, oh, I'm going to try that. And I started to learn a little bit more about calories and calorie consumption and control. So I started in that, but I didn't learn anything else. I learned that you got to get protein, you got to get calories. Fat's generally not great because it's got a lot of calories in it. So eat carbs and protein, but nothing about food quality. Focus too much on timing. I just went all in on the energy thing, and I got super ripped. And for the first time, and I was like, this is great. I'm going to just do that. But the calorie equation and what most people start to learn about from a calorie perspective is just there's not enough depth to it. I basically learned that if I stay in a calorie deficit, I lose body fat. But what happens when you lose the body fat? Then what do you eat after that? How do you adjust how much food you're taking in? What does maintenance start to come out of a diet? How do you come out of a cutting phase? All of that was foreign to me, and it wasn't really included in like the general information of like, when you want fat, you just cut calories. So I didn't really have a good exit strategy out of getting lean. All I did was just ate very little for a long time after I was lean and training super hard and just wearing myself out and starting to have cravings and massive binge eating and just big fluctuations. And I wasn't really giving myself good nourishment. I was just eating whatever hit the numbers. Like I didn't understand that, calories are not all equal in terms of the nutritional value that they offer. And I was probably undernourished in a pretty significant way in a handful of micronutrients. And I had a major injury that I sustained around that time as a result of a hyper focus on caloric restriction.
And probably being in a deficit for so long.
And you couldn't recover yourself.
So completely. Yeah. Which then basically led down this path of, feeling bad about myself because rain and lost my body composition that I loved. And all I knew was like, to get back at that, I have to go back to this manufactured way of eating with food that tastes kind of marginal.
Plain.
It's really low energy, plain, and it's just unsustainable. And so I was really searching for a solution, a nutritional solution thereafter to how do I get lean and stay lean and not think about food all day and actually get to eat more. How do I do that? And that's when I stumbled into kind of call it the paleo zone world. Like zone I tried, it was like, but then it was like, it kind of brought me back to like, I have to count everything and I just fucking don't want to do that. But if I stick to particular food groups, quality food groups like paleo, then guess what? That actually, that controls calories in a way for me. If I eat meat and vegetables and, some fruit and some nuts, like I get full off of that and it helps me moderate my calories. I'm training. And so I started to look good. I started to look better and I didn't have to worry about, eating the, really bring chicken breast with soggy salads that I was eating prior to that to get this composition. So those where it became very connected to the quality of food and why certain choices that we make, why eating this versus that has its benefit and value. And now I've come kind of full circle to being like, okay, we need to have for people of, let's teach the quantity conversation and let's get them to understand it. And then let's look at all quality or food group diets that are out there and help them understand how does this actually just help you better manage your caloric intake and find good balance. And for most people, you can eat pizza and burgers and fries and drink soda and have candy and still hit your macros and your calories. Plenty of people have shown like, hey, look, I can eat a Big Mac a weight, but is it the best way to go about it? No. So where you place quality or the conversation of foods, I know that needs to be part of the conversation when we begin with people, even when we're just talking about energy. There needs to be a real education, and I'm sure you agree with this, where it's like, okay, let me this is how much you need to eat, but let me visually show you what it looks like to eat that in 5 different ways. You can eat it this way, and when you do it that way, and you give practical, food menus or example meals, then you're not talking calories anymore. You're actually having a quality food conversation with them. What what is the difference in food quality when you look at different foods? So, the hierarchy that you laid out makes a ton of sense to me. And it's just the question of like, how do you define food quality? How do you introduce the conversation about which foods are better, worse? The idea that there's no bad food, I really resonate with. There aren't foods, but there are foods that you can eat a lot more of and more frequently and have more success around health, aesthetics, and performance. So, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think like when you were eating for performance, let's say in 2016, when you like post that picture that you were huge, like, I don't know, like your weight at that point, but what is the main difference between that time of eating from now? Like, how do you had an idea how many calories you were and what?
Yeah,
because
I didn't track calories back then at all. What I did was I had, during periods of time when I was training, consistently, I would pretty much eat the same thing most days, with my weekends just sort of eating whatever I wanted, having refeed what I guessed before. So I was not measured about the amount of food that I needed to take in. I never missed my minimum requirement for protein, but I was all over the map with fats and carbs, and most, maybe for like Monday through Friday, I was consistent. Weekends, like, I would just have different stuff, and but I didn't track calories, so I would just consume till I was content. Like, I never felt hungry. I would not let myself feel hungry. It was like, gotta feed myself. And then particularly in competitions, I would eat everything and anything. So my weight was up probably at 195, 197 pounds in that photograph, maybe even more. And again, I was just always fueling myself to just
let us show us the public like
recover.
this picture. Rudy, pode subir a foto?
It's going to show the picture for people to have an idea, the physique at that point. And to be honest, probably you were... Oh, there you go. So,
galera, when he were an athlete, he was in this right picture here. Can you see the picture?
I can, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So right there, you didn't have an idea of the caloric intake, but again, you were training so hard and so often that probably if you eat the protein but you can eat whatever.
How crazy it is, because he's probably training at minimum 4 hours a day at a really high intensity. And even though he couldn't get as lean as like the picture on the left.
That's called thermodynamics. And
he was
balance.
In the surplus for sure. So that's crazy.
That's right. Yeah. And is, much more recent, and it's definitely not an optimal body composition for competitive athletics. So on the left, that level of leanness and to be honest, just being pretty, not dehydrated, but just really dry in that picture. That's not, you give up a lot in the way of performance being that lean. And
not just that,
more so
there's
in recovery.
A lot that you
more so
give in when it comes to that leanness. I don't know if for you, this is a topic that I want to go into a little bit in terms of body image and how you deal with that, because transitioning first, like giving up from an athlete, it's a hard choice already, because you completely change your life and the way you think and do business and everything in your life. But when you get to that lean, was something easy for you? Like, or because it looks like you were doing that in a huge caloric deficit, and it's almost like, okay, I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show and I'm in a deficit and I have been sustaining a deficit and I'm not binge eating and I'm not allowing myself to like off days. Like, for you to get to that point, was that natural in terms of, oh, my body just went to that because I was spending a lot? Or no, you knew the amount of steps you were doing, amount of calories you're eating, you're tracking constantly. Like, for people to achieve that and for you to achieve that, what was the process?
Yeah, I can just... Well, that process, I want to say that photo was taken sometime in 2021.
Okay.
So if you were able to pull up a picture of me in like early 2019 or somewhere in there, my condition was quite different. I was still very muscular. I looked more like the competitive CrossFit photo that you showed. When in late 2019, early 2020, I started to track my macros and calories again for the first, 10, 15 years. And I started to get precise where, I had my meals inputted into my Fitness Pal. I was like aiming for particular numbers each day. And that was like, and I was like 95% adherent. And then when COVID hit and lockdowns happened, I started to get very adherent to those numbers because there was just so little to do. There was no entertainment. There was no going out. There was no, our life was in the same space every day. We never really left our house except for to go on walks out in the backyard. And I was also practicing intermittent fasting, which I don't think is that relevant to this. But what intermittent fasting did during that time was when cravings would come up, which they certainly do the more lean you get, is that I had very, very strong willpower to say, I'm not going to eat outside of these eating windows. So I never missed a day. I was eating, I averaged between 3,700 to 3,900 calories per day, which is a lot for like, basically think about it like 8 months without missing a beat. And my energy expenditure was probably 4,200 to 4,400 on average. So I was in a deficit of about anywhere from 300 to 400 calories for about 6 months or 4 to 6 months. And for lean, I dropped probably like 8 pounds of body fat in that time. So, those numbers might be adjusted, but it was not like some crazy 2,000 calorie deficit or 1,000 calorie deficit. It was a slow and steady, over the course of the first of the pandemic, I got super lean. And at that point,
but you were training like a motherfucker.
Yeah,
like you have like a 4,400 calorie expander.
Yeah.
Like,
so I'll be totally transparent. Right now, I train, like my training during that time was walking every day because that was our routine. Wake up, we have our kids at home, we take them for like an hour walk. Okay. I might take them for another walk in the evening, or we might get out and go walk as a family. But that's what we did during pandemic, was walk. Then 2 days a week, I rode my mountain bike, which was anywhere from minutes to 2 hours of pretty hard pedaling in the mountains close to my house.
Okay.
And then 4 days a week, I would go in my backyard and train for about 90 minutes. Right. I would do like 60 minutes of training and then 30 minutes of making content, which is just me doing exercises out in the sun. And then the other time I was either working or I was with my kids. And that was my movement for that whole period of time, which puts me at about 4,000 calories a day of energy expenditure. Right now,
I remember that at time. Like,
I do 4 days of training.
10.
Right now, I do 4 days of training a week, and then the other 3 days, like then there's 3 days of distance training, and I walk anywhere between 15 and 18,000 steps a day, which is a lot of walking.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. But I do a lot of work while I'm walking. So I have a desk treadmill, right? And I also do a lot of work on my phone when I'm walking. I take meetings when I'm walking. And, I eat 4,000 calories a day right now. And that's like energy. That's energy balance for me. I'm leaning out a little bit at that amount right now.
I know that you were following the meat and fruit diet. Like you are
I did.
reaching that calories, like 4,000 calories in just on meat and fucking fruit?
Yeah, well, I was eating a lot of fat. My fat went super high. My protein was quite high. And so because I ate dairy as well, it was very easy for me to hit my calorie, requirements on that diet. Like I would have 2 pounds of meat a day, probably 4 tablespoons of, beef tallow and 5 ounces of cheese and, yogurt and milk. And then you name, a bunch of fruit on top of that. Um, that was not in my opinion, type of energy that I needed and the way I like to eat. Like it wasn't a very satiating diet. Like I needed more carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, especially starchy carbohydrates, tend to have a good satiety factor for me. So that was my experience with the meat and diet was really to see, okay, can I optimize anything about my hormone function? Can I optimize anything about my digestion? And is this going to add simplicity to my diet? And really it added complexity because I was trying to make sure I was getting all of these different animal, foods into my day. I was eating liver, I was eating heart, pancreas, rotating organs. I was eating different types of meat. I was making sure to get, certain types of fat. I was always looking for raw dairy to have on hand and purchasing and making sure I dosed enough. And then could I rotate my fruits around? And honestly, it became just, a little bit more complex than I wanted it to be. And my blood chemistries changed in a way that I didn't really feel good about. Like my cholesterol, my LDL and total cholesterol went like almost tripled, which again is arguably not, I mean, a lot of data points to that not being good for, longevity and heart health. And whereas like all my other blood markers for metabolic health were actually quite good. So it was like, is this the one thing I should be worried about and particularly feel great about it? Not to mention, I didn't feel like I was performing very well without a more substantial amount of carbohydrates from sources. And so that was when I decided I was going to like maybe change some of my approaches again. And I had experimented with it long enough to say, okay, this is what I learned from it. This is what I'm going to take from it. This is what I'm going to keep doing. But I want to, incorporate some new things back in or old things back into my diet.
And at any point, did you feel like, oh, I developed some negative relationship with food, or at that level of leanness, I'm having,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry, just the cravings, and there was a point that you said, okay, I have to stop with that, and I need to get my act together when it
Yeah.
comes to eating and being healthy and not stick to a leanness point. Like, did that happen? Any struggles with you? Because when I get to very lean points, and that happened last year, I got like super lean and I did a restriction and everything was planned. I was meant to stop in 3 months, my deficit. That was the cut. I hit the numbers and I couldn't let go. So I would push one more week, one more week, one more week, to the point that I pushed the deficit for 5 months and I dropped like 3 kilos less than I was. It affected my relationship. I started like to go in at midnight on Instagram just to see food. And I remember to this day, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was looking through food and my Instagram would just like the algorithm was just showing food. And I went to the freeze and I ate everything. And I said, I'm done. I'm stopping and I need to let go because I'm not mentally well. I did what I tell everybody not to do. Did you get to any point of struggle?
I've had points of struggle. I mean, as somebody who, I really, this was not like an intentional cut. This was not like I'm doing this because I'm going to, go in some purposeful caloric deficit. I haven't done that in quite some time. I was eating what felt like a lot of food, a lot of calories, and moving. My body was changing as a result of being in a slight deficit for long enough. But I certainly got to a point where, and there's a certain where it disrupts sleep. Like I was sleeping not great, and I would get was also a carb cycling thing where I was like doing low carb most days and then high carb for a day. And I was basically just like getting these massive cramps at night. Like I was having major cramping issues,
I know how it feels.
which was, yeah, it was brutal. And then I was also, remember I told you the intermittent fasting thing. Like I was fasting from 2 p.m. until 6 a.m. the next day. So my fasting window was, I would skip dinner. So I'd be like, very, very underfed, in my sleep. And that was disruptive. Plus my energy level in the afternoon was not the way I wanted it to be around my family. And yeah, I was like, I was food focused. I was thinking about like, oh, going to have this weekend that's fun and entertaining for food. And where it was like, why am I thinking about that? I'm spending and wasting energy on thinking about like a refeed day or something. So that became very clear to me that like, this is not how I want this to be. And I think it became ingrained in my head and my thinking early on when I was in that college phase of being really hyper lean, that like I saw myself as a very shredded, lean individual at the age of like 20. And I was like, that's what I think I see as myself for the rest of my life. Like I want to be that person. So in the periods of time in my life where I've gotten lean and that person is really like more like those muscles have popped out more. Yeah. It's easy to get like addicted to that feeling and to that look. It's why like the idea of bodybuilding and the sport of bodybuilding to me is really compelling. And it's something I think is beautiful. I love the dedication, the discipline, but I'm mostly fearful of like, if I go down that route and I get into like contest shape, like it's a psychological war. Yeah. I would have to go through to like see myself like that. And then to not see myself like that. And so I definitely got into some, it was clearly presenting some obstacles. This is what made me think, okay, I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to try animal-based eating. I'm going to, like I experimented, I gave up intermittent fasting, which was a whole process of changing my body's rhythms, which took months and months, probably half a year, basically stopped that, which was tough, really tough.
We had the same issue.
Yeah. But the biggest one was going back to when I was, in my early 20s, and I had left I went through, as I mentioned, the injury, which, let's say I'm 20, 21 years old. I'm really, really lean. I wish I still had pictures from those periods of time because, they'd be great.
But when you say like, I was really, really lean, you mean leaner than that left picture that we showed?
Basically, that guy left with less muscle mass. So, I mean, I hadn't developed as much muscle mass when I was 21, but yeah, I had like, I could see striations in my quads and my lower abs had all kinds of veins and vasculature on it. I was a college kid that just looked like I was probably 170 pounds and just really ripped. Whereas in that picture, I was 180 pounds, and equally ripped. So, that was me in college when I lost control because I couldn't train anymore, lost the ability to diet the way I was dieting before because it was just unsustainable. I had been in a deficit for too long. I really got into a bad way with food, like a really bad relationship where I started this binge cycle where it was like I would binge and then the next day I would starve myself, and the next day I would binge and then I would starve myself, and then I would binge and then I would starve, where I was like constantly trying to undereat to try and maintain leanness, but then I couldn't sustain it and I would overeat, and it was a horrible, horrible phase of life that I was going through. And it really impacted me for many, many years in the future where, like I said, I was just, I wanted to have nothing to do with counting calories, thinking about, food, how to make my body look better. And that's why I was so grateful to find kind of the CrossFit with like just eating high quality paleo foods, where basically when I went to paleo, it just was like, oh, just don't eat a bunch of processed carbs. And what did that do? It like cut out a bunch of calories and I started to feel and look better, So
yeah,
that was
so simple.
It was such an important time, which that's what we want for people. We want to help them discover a way of eating that feels simple for them to adhere to and not have to think about it so much to achieve a body that they want. Now, nobody's going to achieve a body that's 6, 7, 8% body fat without thinking about it a lot. That doesn't happen by accident. And I'm not here to tell anybody like, oh yeah, I just did a little extra walking. And it's like, no, I was like moving every day. I was like, I never missed my numbers. Like,
but man, that's what I want to tackle, because the way you talk, it looks like it was supernatural. And looking to that picture,
in many ways it was.
The struggle.
In many ways it was. The struggle though was, and here's the mantra that I use, and it was very much aligned with this intermittent fasting protocol, was that I didn't allow myself to eat in these other windows of time. And so even on a day where I had 3,800 calories, but deficit, I'd get hungry and I'd be like, you know what? I'm not going to eat. And you know what? Hunger is not an emergency. If I wake up and I'm still this hungry, I'll eat a little bit more food tomorrow. And that mentality,
but then it didn't like start affecting the relationship and your mood, and because all these things happen to me. People start telling me you're getting nasty, you're not being the nicest person around to be around, and I could tell, but I would push it harder because I would look better. And then no, just a little bit more, just 1 more hour of fasting. And it became a cycle. So you never went through that?
Yeah. I don't think I got that far into it. I mean, I got to places where it personally was not working for me. And again, my energy level started to drop. But once I reached that certain level of leanness, I started to allow myself to have a lot more, days off, refeed days. And the beauty of being like lean and a big surplus of muscle on your body, or relatively big surplus of muscle, is that you can tolerate, refeed days. Like I could eat 5,000 calories or 6,000 calories on a day, and then, sort of replenish stores, and I would feel good for, many, many days. And then I would kind of dip into a deficit that felt bad, and my focus was off, and I was maybe cranky a little bit, but then I refeed. And so I kind of maintained a better balance that way. But even then it was like, there's a point at which time cramping, the focus, the mental focus on just thinking about food. Like you talked about scrolling Instagram and looking at pictures of food. It was like I was watching food channels on YouTube and be like, oh, this is the cool recipe I'm going to do this weekend. And it's like, which is fun, but it's like a lot of that's being inspired by the fact that I'm just underfed. And so I knew that one of the things that was going to allow me to kind of break this cycle was like, I need to get out of this kind of religious obsession with intermittent fasting. That was one. I need to stop that. And I also think I need to just like, perceive as a lot of calories. It's like still a deficit for me. So I need to like go through intentional periods of, we'll call them like lean massing, so it's like, okay, for the next month, main gaining, right? Like for the next month or two, I'm going to purposefully eat 4,200 to 4,300 calories a day and just kind of raise my energy. And I'm going to give up some leanness, but that's going to help me, dramatically in just feeling better and having the mental clarity to like approach all the parts of my life that I want.
Yeah. And
but there's no question too that like, there is still like an unhealthy relationship in my brain with like, I want to look like that. Like I see that picture on the left, I'm like that every day. Like how do I, and it's not, there are,
but you try to keep in check.
To look like that every day. Yes.
And what is the current diet, current energy expenditure and goals that you have body-wise, body composition right now?
Well, right now I'm mainly just trying to heal my shoulder. So I've been spending the last 6 weeks just sort of focusing on the health of my shoulder. It kind of like the same injury from 2016 that I revealed to start the functional bodybuilding journey. It resurfaced. I have some underlying issues from that I just didn't attend to enough. So healing that has been the main focus. That's why I've kind of dropped down to distance training a week and really not a lot of upper body like intensity. But I had gone through a period where I was like really some like focused hypertrophy work for about 3 months, a lot of intense hypertrophy training. And I was eating, 4,000 to 4,200 calories a day. And I was really enjoying that process, but it pissed off my shoulder a lot. I needed to like rethink, approach that. So when I'm healthy again, that's certainly going to be my focus around training and not because I think I can build a bunch of muscle mass at this age, and at this training experience, but because I really am fascinated by, doing more like hypertrophy specific training, and I want to learn more and bring more of that to my audience. And the eating has been really fun, getting like switching from my last year, which was very high fat, low-ish carb, to now going back to a very high carb diet and sticking to my, the protein I've always gotten, and reintroducing plant sources into my diet after 7 months of animal-based eating, and just that has felt really good and something I've appreciated a lot. And then just getting back to like, more, we'll call them like more sustainable or balanced approaches to eating, where I can still stay committed to my goals around body composition, but be much more flexible with like eating out, having meals with my, going to restaurants, doing things that are social around food, and seeing like, well, how can I make that like part of my long-term approach to life? Because I don't want to be a restrictive, regimented, fanatical
I
diet.
remember to this day one email that you send. You have like an awesome newsletter with very good information, and one of the emails you would equate body fat levels to cheat days, and I don't remember like the number you said. Okay, 7% is one cheat day every 6 months or 3 months. I don't remember the data, but that makes me think that you are not a guy that does a lot of cheat days. Is that so, or what's your relationship with cheat days?
I mean, the way I would define a cheat day, the day where you go over your caloric numbers, not a day where you eat like a cookie. It's like a cookie, if you practice something like flexible dieting, like, a cookie fits onto any day of the week. You just, if you eat a cookie, then that means you're going to eat less of something else. So the days that I actually like go considerably over my caloric, goal, they're not a lot, but they happen. The days that I cheat are days where I'm underfed from days before. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I'm so aware of, where most people don't even, they shouldn't spend time thinking about this, but I'm like, look, if I get to Saturday and I want to eat, like, I want to go to the cupboard and just be eating, like, that's because I didn't eat enough earlier this week. Like, I'm lean. I don't need to get leaner. If I want to get leaner, then I'm going to have to fight the urge to go to the cupboard. But I'm not in a place in life right now where I want to fight the urge to go to the cupboard. Yeah. And that's the thing you have to decide is like, if I want to get down sub 10% body fat, then you're going to have to spend time fighting the urge to go to the cupboard, and you can want to do that or not.
I think we can go a little bit more towards the family side, your switch from your business side, your professional athlete to business owner. How you deal with it, like in performance wise? Oh my gosh, I'm not doing like 225
my
easily.
is going down, my snatches.
I'm not like squatting as heavy as before. I gotta see more numbers than I can train. How you dealt with it?
Well, I think for a number of years was the story I told myself was that, I had other things that I was very focused on, and I bring energy towards to make myself proud. I wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to run a good business. That I was, I looked, and I was still pretty functional. I could still do a lot. I had, by most people's estimations, pretty strong, and I knew I wasn't as fit and couldn't do as many things athletically as I could when I was at my peak in CrossFit. Yeah, that was enough for me to be like, it's okay that my numbers are down. It's okay that I can't snatch what I snatched before, or clean or front squat.
It's maturity.
And then I think, but also after years, I kind of also started to ask the question, am I just giving myself a pass at not pushing myself in the gym? Am I not training hard? And here's the thing, as I'm getting more advanced in my lifting and athletic age, I realize that effort is the thing that we're chasing, that we need to bring to training, and that the objective numbers on the bar, how much you can lift versus how much you're actually building the parts of your body you want to build, are very different things.
Yeah.
A back squat at 450 doesn't, that's huge. And doing, sets of 375 for 4 or 5 reps, that'll make a impact physique. But a 375 back squat for 5 versus, a 225 squat for 10 to 15 reps in the right position, with your right place, with your torso in the right place, with your knees over your toes, well, that might train your quads a hell of a lot better than the 375 squats. And I see guys that I used to compete with that are still strong as hell, and they can lift all the stuff, but
what is the point of it?
Yeah, I don't know. I want to look good, and I want to feel good. And doing a 375 back squat for a set of 5 is not going to make me look as good as if I do a different number, lighter number, with great tempo, with good position, with with higher reps. I can make it hurt.
That's good, because we are in the same road.
Good.
I'm the same.
Yeah, and just train and put my
mind.
What was the it's muscles are going to respond to tension on them. Yeah. And I've learned more and more over the past years where it's functional bodybuilding got me connected to the idea that I can put tension on muscles, certain exercises and certain positions at lighter weights than I did in CrossFit, and get a very good stimulus out of it.
Don't you think
people wonder, Marcus, why aren't you as... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The delay is not helping us. But
no, yeah.
I was about to say, you transition to more bodybuilding style, but definitely you couldn't let go the aerobic parts. Don't you think that it's a component that, okay, you still building your engine, your aerobic capacity, but is going a little bit against your goal to build a little bit more muscle? How you deal with it, when you are thinking in a workout, I see you putting a single arm cable pull with wall balls, and then a set of row, and then you're gonna rest, you're gonna feel ready to do a hard set again. But how you, as a trainer, I wanna try to understand when you program that, and that thing is not taking you towards the most optimal way to build muscle. Yeah. So did you get my question?
I do. Absolutely. Yeah. And it comes down to the goal. What is the goal? I rarely talk to people that come in. They say, "Look, I want to just build muscle, the most muscle possible, and I'll do whatever it takes." I hear people come in and say, "I want to look better. I want to enjoy the process, and I want to, I want to find something that I can do over and over again." And people want to feel fit too, right?
Yeah.
So I make a lot of assumptions about what I think people want. Given the track record I've had with like building programs that people enjoy, like I think I have a decent, take on what people, and, if I'm going to go and train somebody for a bodybuilding competition, we're not going to do low and lat cable pull down intervals. Like that's not the way. But if somebody's like enjoys work capacity, they want to build some aerobic fitness. They value having cardiovascular health.
Yeah.
They enjoy mixed modal training. They enjoy CrossFit. They also appreciate doing some bodybuilding because they want to put their muscles under tension. Like, right? Because you think about people who did CrossFit, they came in, that was their first exposure to training. They didn't build a lot of muscle. They just got strong and their performance went up, and maybe they lost some body fat, and good. But like most people did not, because they didn't actually lift enough weights. They needed to do some bodybuilding for a while to build muscle. Like, okay, I want to give people some bodybuilding, and I want to keep them doing things that they enjoy doing and building aerobic capacity and building work capacity across broad time and modal domains, right? It's like, I still believe in those things because people enjoy them, and it keeps them really engaged in the process. And, resistance training, bodybuilding, or hypertrophy approaches to training absolutely can get people to look great and can build some good work capacity, but there's a lot left on the table that it's too much to know that like these are other things that I think really belong and can be incorporated into someone's training. And also, to one more point, is that like you see me doing exercises that are definitely not the best exercise to put tension on the muscle to grow. Right?
Yeah, I was about to ask you.
A Cossack squat's not the best exercise to build your legs.
Yeah. But like, if somebody came up to you
back squat
and asked, "How is your training like now?" Like, how would you define your training program?
I think now
like
he's said he's recovering from the injury, but I think it's more, what do you plan it to be? You said it's gonna be, you want to try to make it a little bit more hypertrophy focused. So what you're aiming for after the nagging injury?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I'm still a functional bodybuilder. That's pretty much it. Like there's not going to be a departure from building some work capacity. I want to explore the nuances of and I have been for quite some time, but the nuances of like, what does it mean to approach resistance training from I'm going to put my muscles in the best possible state with sets and reps to grow versus get just stronger. So not looking at strength gains, but looking at mass gain. Now I understand that in order to grow muscle, there's the right things I need to do nutritionally. There's the right things I would need to do from like an energy balance standpoint. But if I were to just dedicate to like, these are the training methodologies, I've always learned by doing things. I don't necessarily need to go out and put on 5 pounds of muscle with these principles to understand how they are going to impact individuals when I coach them and write programs. So I don't mean to say like, I'm going to switch over to a hypertrophy focus. So, in 2023, everybody get ready to see Marcus with more muscle. Like I'm not going to go through a bulking phase in any time soon, probably for the rest of my life. That's not how I see myself as my priority and growing as
Let me tell you, I just went through one, and the mirror was the last thing I was looking at. Yeah. I would walk, like I live in Miami. I'm here in São Paulo, but I live in Miami Beach. So the walking to the gym, I remember it's
always
like
with the shirt
always
on.
1.5 kilometers. And in the heat of Miami, in the middle of the summer, I was walking and I said, I'm not taking my shirt off. Like, I'm that body conscious. And I was always a guy like lean on the leaner side. And I pushed the envelope. I went from 85 kilos to 93. I was eating 4,200 calories a day and like pushing calories into myself, but to the point that I didn't want to look in the mirror. So go into a bulk phase, especially for someone that comes from CrossFit, is used to intermittent fasting, very lean. It's a mental struggle. Like it's hard for you, and to see feedback from people, because then I would do a stories and like, oh, do you have allergies on your face? Like, you seem a little puffy. And I was like, no, I'm fat. I'm just fat. It's hard.
Yeah. It's not something I really feel compelled to do, because I think I understand what some of those struggles would be and some of the trade-offs to do that. But training perspective, I'm still curious to do it, and I'm also curious to continue to incorporate some work capacity that feels good next to doing that sort of training too. So like, what do Metcons look like, or what could a Metcon, or what could a functional bodybuilding conditioning workout look like next to that and work? And then, I'm always going to love being outdoors. When the weather gets nicer again, I'm going to be wanting a mountain bike again too, because that's fun. And so yeah, it's if anybody's done my programs or knows what my current functional bodybuilding programs look like, it's going to be the same. It's going to be very much the same, except for when I do my strength work, it's going to be probably in the 10 to 20 rep ranges for a lot of exercises. I'm going to incorporate more machines in my training and more isolation work. I'm going to focus on movement positions that put muscles under more mechanical tension than a traditional lift that was just there to kind of develop overall strength. And so those are the subtle differences I'm talking about.
Tell us a little bit more about your place. How was this transition like now, from having like a leg press, like cables, these leg extension machines? Do you run classes there, or is just individual training? Tell us a little bit more about Revival supplements that I just remember now.
Yeah. Well, the business side, so our business now is just functional bodybuilding. We don't have any other businesses that we run. And functional bodybuilding is an online, virtual coaching platform. We have a functional bodybuilding subscription called Persist, where people can come and try all of our training programs. We deliver all of our education information through that platform. We also had one thing for people who really want to like jump deep into it with a coach and have them guide their fitness and nutrition training. But I used to have a supplement company that doesn't exist anymore. We used to have a gym that was open to the public where I'm at now, but now it's a studio for podcasting and for filming content. And that studio, because it didn't need to serve the purpose of having 20 people training at the same time, we decided, hey, maybe we should update this place to make it look more like a studio, make it have a visual appeal, partner with a company that supply great equipment. And I also want to get some machines in here, because I always believe that like there's value in having machines right next to functional equipment too. And so that was early in 2022, we updated the facility to include basically new equipment, new machines.
They are great. They look great.
Yeah. And we have plans to do more of that this year. We're going to do kind of like a 2.0 version and update the equipment, update the layout. But I want to show functional in a lot of different ways. I want to show like, when somebody tunes into our media, I want them to see like, oh shit, he's doing a leg press and he's doing kettlebell swings in the same session. Like, those things belong in the same place, and so many commercial gyms as you know it, like any of the great gyms in Miami, you walk in and what do they have? They've got a functional training space.
Yeah.
They've got a traditional training. They've got a turf right in the middle. You can do it all in the same building, and people don't know how to use it all, and certainly don't know how to combine it. And like if you walk into that space and you've got access to all that equipment, and you have you feel confident to move yourself around, and your program helps you get a little bit of each thing, you're gonna feel like, damn, I want to do fitness all the time. This is a blast. I got so many options. I got so much variety, and it all works together. So that to me is what the evolution of the space, the gym space is. But it's all in service of getting more people connected to the brand and to subscribe to our programs, where we really guide you through a great, like I believe, like beautiful hybrid of looking good and moving well with bodybuilding and functional training.
That's so nice.
And that changed a lot the way, like, what you do for work. Because now you have a lot that is like recording, communicating, being in the camera, talking to the camera, researching content, seeing the way your delivery works, seeing the insights, like partner with other methodologies like knee over the toes guy. And how was the switch for you, and how comfortable did you feel in the beginning, and what are the tips you can give for people that are trying to make this transition from coaching to being a fitness influencer and trying to influence people by their own programming?
I mean, every part of it was very natural. Like most of these changes to my business, like, have not been premeditated. They just happen because this is where the tide has taken me, so to speak. I was coaching a lot, and then started to get some requests for people to have me coach them online because they saw I was a famous CrossFitter, and they said, hey, will you be my coach? I live in Australia. Okay, let's try this thing remotely, right? And then in 2017, the next evolution was, Marcus, you're doing this awesome training, this functional bodybuilding stuff. Like, I want to do functional bodybuilding. I'm like, okay, well, you could hire me as a coach. Like, well, I don't want that. I just want to try your program. Okay, well, let me write a program, first ebook, right? And then the ebook did well. And so we had to do more of that, right? And then it was like, how do we market this better? Oh, we got to do more content. We got to hire a videographer. We got to do this, right? So I never made a transition until there was a demand. So that's my first point is, if you're a coach, a fitness coach, and you're doing well and nobody is asking for anything different from you, then it might be hard to make a transition. Whereas if you're a fitness coach and you've got 40 hours in a week that you want to do personal training, but you've got 80 people asking you for training every week, well, guess what? You've got demand that surpasses your ability to fulfill. So you can either raise your prices, or you can make a second product that you can, and that second product should be something more scalable than what you can do with an hour of your time. Or maybe you want to get all 80 of those people onto a product where you're doing something virtual or online, and you're selling some type of something else that's not your time, right? So make the decision to jump into a new way of delivering your business until people demand it. It's like somebody's got a very small following and doesn't have any clients, and is training like 5 people personal training a week, and like, I want to start like selling programs online. I'm like, well, nobody wants your programs. Like, you only have 5 clients. Like,
it's such a good point
and I'm
of
not
view.
trying to be harsh. It's just like,
yeah,
I do think people, they think that, like, I do this thing. I'm like, well,
I want to do this thing because everybody's doing.
Yeah. And yeah. So none of my evolutions as a business owner.
That's crazy.
Like, I'm going to jump.
Not just the business.
And I'll tell you one more thing, but like, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Delay. It's crushing me.
I was saying if you look in nutrition-wise, the way you conduct, or the changes that you made, it didn't seem that anything was like so effort that you have to. It was effortless and not so premeditated. So it's crazy how the whole talk about nutrition and the transitions and all the business, I had an impression that you were like thinking ahead the curve, but it looks like it was a more natural way for you than anything else.
I would say that's accurate. You know, a lot of what I've done to this point in my career as an athlete, body composition, has been just sort of a natural response to what I hear, you know, out there, what I want to do, and just a natural learning process. And then I take what I've learned through all these things and I try and, you know, distill it down for the audience. And that's been what's helped people connect with me more, is just sharing my lessons and knowledge with people. And now that the business is where it's at, where, you know, of course I want to be a better business owner, which means being a little bit more strategic and planning and premeditated about how we're going to grow or increase our reach or make this more secure and valuable. So that I'm having to learn, you know, and same with training. Like when it came to being like very precise and premeditated about things, like I hired a coach when I was a CrossFit athlete. I'm like, do you do that for me? Like I in the moment and learn and just learn through the process of doing it, you know. I don't so even as an athlete now at 38, it's like, okay, if I want to be more premeditated about something for myself, how would I go about that? Right. And I don't know that that's my strength or what I really want to be doing. What I'd rather be doing is, you know, be more prescriptive and premeditated with my customers and come up with the best programs for them. And, you know, when it comes to myself, like I'm just going to keep moving through life, learning lessons, taking energy, you know, in different directions as I sort of feel like I want to go. And, you know, someone might argue like, well, that's not the best way to see growth. And it's like, it's the way I've always done it. It's the way I live my life and that I approach, you know, new things. And like you're like, what's your training going to look like? I'm like, well, I don't have a 6-month plan to map out for you. I'm like, I'm going to do this progressive overload cycle and I'm going to do all, like, that's not where I'm at, you know, in life.
That's cool.
That's so different. Yeah. When you see from the outside, sometimes you have an image of, okay, probably a whole marketing strategy, a whole premeditation, and talking to you is like very laid back, very...
Even the program from my side,
like everything, but it all relates to the kind of personality that it's easily seeable when you talk to the guy and you see how he takes life and just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Well, and I also don't want to, the one thing I hate to do is I don't want to set false expectations. Like you said, like it seems like, you know, achieving that body just came very naturally. It's like,
yeah, I don't want people to think that.
Of what is my perception of what is natural and what is just go with the flow to many people is like highly disciplined and very thought out, executed, you know, but like that is my perception of how I'm moving through life. And I am extremely disciplined as a person. I think about scenarios and I evaluate myself all the time. I'm not like, how do I feel today? It's like I'm talking about all of this stuff. So it does take a tremendous amount of work, and like the marketing doesn't, you know, just happen by accident. We have a plan and a system that we execute on all the time. I've got a great marketing partner, you know, business partner, tremendous amount to help our newsletters, you know, the content you see on social media, YouTube. Like we have a very a scripted structure to what we do. I just you know, like it's and it's gotten better over time. I mean, years ago I had nothing. I didn't even have an email list, you know, so I'm just growing and evolving. Like I didn't, and to the original question, it wasn't like in 2016, okay, I sold my CrossFit gym. Now I've got to start an email list. I got to build this. I'm going to do that. I got to build a YouTube channel. I'm going to grow it this way. It was like, I didn't need that. So I can't give that advice to somebody. I just went with the first logical step, which was, I need a better website. Boom. Better website. And he said, you also need an email list. I was like, whatever that means. I don't even know what that means. And so we built an email list, right? It's like learn by going, because you're solving a problem of, I need to service more people because there's a demand. And then guess what? If you're really asking over again, you'll figure out the answers to like how to do it better.
Yeah.
And nowadays, how do you like the influencer, fitness influencer part, being in front of the camera? Do you like ask a lot from yourself? Do you look the content, you don't like it, you want to redo it? Are you very perfectionist about it? Like, how do you face it?
I do enjoy it. It's but a lot of work, and we're kind of in the, you know, philosophy and the belief that you just need to put out a lot of content. So I don't think you can get too perfectionistic about it, because like a 30-second, you know, Instagram clip is going to be viewed, and then once it's viewed, people aren't going to see it. You know, it's like, it's not going to live, you know. So I don't want to be so perfectionistic about it that I'm wasting time on something that's not going to have that, you know, long lasting. But you know, the parts that are hard for me are really more like being a CEO or a business owner, and the stress of like making sure the company's growing and everyone is taken care of, and looking at, you know, accounting balance sheets and P&Ls, and doing like executive stuff where it's like, I kind of wish that was all just plate, but I can't not have it on my plate. And, you know, I worry about a lot of things. I have, you know, sort of like a pessimistic mind about the future of how things are going to go, which makes me stress more than I'm like just in that place of gratitude for like, man, this is fucking amazing. We've built something really special. We're helping a lot of people. I get to do cool shit every day, every week. I get to 10, I get to train. I get to, you know, talk about fitness, and people love it. And, you know, that I can be grateful for that. But a lot of times I spend maybe just more worried about like, well, what's the next thing that we have to do to keep growing? And that's trade-off of being a business owner. I don't work for somebody else. I work for me, you know. Yeah. Nobody else is going to worry about this stuff as much as me. And it's like the good parts and the bad parts, you know, come with being in this position.
I have another question, like more of curiosity. Aside from fitness, what are your main references? Like, what do you read? People that you look up to? What do you listen? Just for me to understand, like, Marcus Fili a little bit better.
Yeah, most of the things that I do that are outside of like work and fitness are either time with my family, or the rest of the time I'm just thinking about ways to just be a better entrepreneur or coach. So I might look at all kinds of content that's out there, and it's not fitness content, but I'm just thinking, oh, how is this going to make me a better content myself? So I spend a lot of time doing that. But, you know, passions and hobbies are cooking, fooding out with my wife, entertainment. I like getting outdoors. I like biking, and just a big focus on my kids these days, because they're young and they're just a handful, but they are fun. And when we get to spend quality time with them, it always lights me up. So that's pretty simple.
Seems they apparently enjoy much more Marcus Fili now than 2016 and 17. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I'm continually working on that, being able to show up for them more.
Yeah. I think that's a wrap. Like, I'm super excited, and I even more grateful and admire you even more, because not just like what you show on social media and how, as I told you, influenced me, João, our career, our path, but many Brazilians that felt a little lost after CrossFit and the competitive side, and saw light through your eyes and the content you were sharing. And that was very impactful in many people's lives here in Brazil. My path, João's, Lucas, and a lot of other Brazilians that for sure are going to listen to the podcast and relate to the fact that you were such a big influence, and you were such a cool guy to talk with, such laid back and like reachable.
Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate
it.
For
me, it was a dream come true talking to you, and
this was awesome.
Be able to share this moment.
Well, thank you again for having me, and I hope we could do it again. And if you guys are ever out in California, I would love for you to come and visit.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. Our second dream coming through.
That would
Awesome.
be
Thank
great.
you so much,
Okay.
Marcos.
Galera, esse
My
foi
pleasure.
então Philly. Falei aí nesse final, como vocês viram na tradução, foi um sonho para mim e pro João, realizado. E divulgue, compartilhe, porque a gente está tentando trazer um trabalho diferente, mostrando diversas perspectivas do fitness, como essa. Então, não dá share só em bobagem, dá share em conteúdo de valor como esse.
Obrigado, galera.
Valeu.
Valeu. Thank you, Marcos.